Members who are joining remotely must be visible on screen for the purposes of identity verification, establishing and maintaining a quorum, participating in the proceeding, and voting. Those members must continue to use software's platform's video function while in attendance, unless they experience connectivity issues or other technical problems that render them unable to participate on camera. If a member experiences technical difficulties, they should contact the committee staff for assistance. Video of members' participation will be broadcast in the room and via the television internet feeds. Members participating remotely must seek recognition verbally, and they are asked to mute their microphones when they are not speaking. Members who are participating remotely are reminded to keep the software platform's video function on the entire time they attend the proceeding. Members may leave and rejoin the proceeding. If members depart for a short while for reasons other than joining a different proceeding, they should leave the video function on. If members will be absent for a significant period or depart to join a different proceeding, they should exit the software platform entirely and then rejoin if they return. Members may use the software platform's chat feature to communicate with staff regarding technical or logistical Operations Subcommittee on Shaping the Future, a review of the fiscal year 2022 budget request for U.S. Special Operations Forces and Command. Today's hearing follows a significant shift in the operational landscape, which has dictated the deployments, training, and lives of Special Operations Forces through the withdrawal from Afghanistan. For the last 2 decades, Special Operations Forces answered our nation's calls, responding to the most dangerous threats in the most difficult environments. The wars in Afghanistan and Iraq consume SOF in profound ways which we do not yet fully understand. The neurological trauma, psychological burden, and moral injury borne by the women and men across the SOF formation, enablers and operators alike, must be properly diagnosed, treated, and rehabilitated. The withdrawal from Afghanistan provides an opportunity to provide timely care for the formation and demonstrate commitment to soft truth number 1, that humans are more important than hardware. As such, I appreciate the prioritized investments in cognitive rehabilitation and performance research through the Preservation of the Force and Family Program, which is a critical vehicle to deliver specialized care and support across the formation. We must not lose sight that although SOF make up a small percentage of total joint force, they have endured the bulk of U.S. combat casualties over the last years. Today's hearing is focused on the FY22 budget request for Special Operations Command and SOF. The budget request highlights SOCOM's shifting focus to confront the complex threat landscape we face, most notably calling for a reinforcement of core competencies in irregular warfare, clandestine activities, and information operations, as well as investments in the unique capabilities that enable those activities. Additionally, the command invests in cybersecurity, rotary wing upgrades, and accelerated development of emergent technologies required for the future fight. But winning the future fight is not just by requiring new things. It's about making sure our Special Operations Forces themselves have the skill and experience necessary to respond to the demands of strategic power competition. That means making a coherent and deliberate effort to diversify the SOF workforce in both background and skill set. Prioritizing diversity in SOF also means widening the range of expertise in technical fields such as cybersecurity, biomedical engineering, and programming, which our forces can bring to bear against our adversaries and enhance our competitive edge. Retainment of diverse personnel is equally important. Retraining manpower in historically undervalued fields such as civil affairs and psychological operations will need to be reprioritized and incentivized in order to compete with the likes of China and Russia. All of these topics, diversity and inclusion, health of force, are essential to our readiness. We need ready, able, and healthy Special Operations Forces to compete. Much in the way one would never approve employment of an aircraft that is only partially airworthy, we cannot condone a partially ready force. With that, let me introduce today's witnesses who would defend USSOCOM's $12.6 billion budget request for fiscal year 2022. Mr. Joseph McMahon, performing the duties of Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations in Low Intensity Conflict, and General Richard Clark, Commander, U.S. Special Operations Command. Gentlemen, we look forward to hearing from your commentary. I will now turn to Ranking Member for any opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank both of you witnesses for being here. I thank you for your opening remarks, Mr. Chairman, and your leadership in organizing this afternoon's posture hearing. Today, we will hear from two leaders across the Special Operations enterprise. The FY22 budget request for Special Operations Command didn't just fail to keep pace with inflation, but it cut the top line for the second year in a row. The FY22 budget request represents a $495 million decrease from FY21, a 4% cut. And the FY21 enacted budget was a $600 million cut from the FY20. Proper authorization and appropriation of national defense activities is vital. We cannot force our SOF formation into the impossible choice between readiness and modernization. As far as current operations go, maybe most pressing of all the threats right now is how SOCOM is postured to continue counterterrorism operations in Afghanistan with the impending redeployment of our troops. As we know, the Biden administration ordered all troops out of the country by September 11 of this year, of which we're currently on target to be ahead of that. And the department continues to push forward ahead of this deadline, now currently targeting August 31 for the complete withdrawal of activities. The way in which we plan to keep an eye on the security situation and the way in which we conduct intelligence gathering in Afghanistan post-withdrawal is of great concern to myself and members of this subcommittee. We continue to hear, but I have yet to be briefed on what over-the-horizon capabilities truly means. And I use this as an example. As a battalion commander or company commander, we used to always back-plan the mission and the fight, but we didn't plan to get out of the assembly area, the uncoiling from an assembly area and getting to an LD on time. Seems like a simple operation, but military operations, as no one knows better than SOCOM, have to be detailed planning and detailed execution, otherwise they fail. So a hand wave of over the horizon doesn't get it for me. We've got to know the detailed plans of how we intend to continue to get after the targets we need to in Afghanistan, North Africa, and other hard-to-reach areas. Lastly, I'd like to publicly voice my support for SOCOM's Armed Overwatch program. I'm pleased and assured by the work conducted by ASD Solic and SOCOM to ensure the right measures have been put in place to validate the need for this platform. I'm eager to see the results of the ongoing demonstrations taking place right now and what that will mean for procurement in FY22. I'd like to thank Representative and Colonel Mike Waltz for his leadership on this issue, and as a special operations community operator for many years and a colonel, he definitely has the background to understand this. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today on all these topics, in addition to this year's budget request and the associated priorities of fiscal year 2022. I want to thank our witnesses in advance for their time today. I look forward to continuing to work with our special operations leaders during the 117th Congress to ensure we are appropriately postured to meet and defeat the threats posed by our adversaries. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Kelly. Now we turn to our witnesses, and we'll start with Mr. McMenamin for your opening remarks.
Chairman Gallego, Ranking Member Kelly, distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify on our global posture for America's Special Operation Enterprise. I'm honored to testify alongside General Clark, who has provided exemplary leadership for our Special Operations soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marine, and civilians. Secretary Austin has outlined his three principal priorities for the department: defend the nation, take care of our people, and succeed through teamwork. The SOF community excels in each of these areas and plays an essential role within the joint force in advancing our strategic priorities. As reflected in SOCOM's FY22 budget request, we continue to invest in capabilities to meet the challenges of strategic competition with China and Russia while strengthening vital alliances and partnerships. As we innovate to compete more effectively, we recognize that our counterterrorism operations must become even more sustainable and focused on the most pressing threats to our citizens and interests. I appreciate the strong support of Congress for our SOF warriors and their families. This community has borne over half of all U.S. combat casualties over the past 2 years, and many more have sustained life-altering injuries and suffered psychological trauma. Enhancing the readiness and resilience of our SOF personnel and their families remains a top priority. Despite the COVID-19 pandemic, SOF have continued to maintain a high level of operational readiness. The President's FY22 budget request sustains funding for SOCOM's Preservation of the Force and Families program to optimize the performance of SOF personnel, and we continue to make progress in easing the strain of high rates of overseas deployments. General Clark and I remain concerned about the moral and ethic health of the SOF community. SOLIC is working closely with SOCOM on the implementation of its comprehensive review of SOF culture and ethics. We are also committed to enhancing diversity within the SOF community. As we compete against increasingly capable adversaries, a more diverse force empowers us to draw upon broader perspectives, different lived experiences, and new ideas. Civilian-military partnership will be critical to addressing these challenges. Finally, we continue to make progress in strengthening SOLIC's role in providing civilian oversight for the SOF enterprise. On 5 May, Secretary Austin reaffirmed ASD SOLIC's role as the principal staff assistant and direct report to the Secretary for SOF administrative matters. We are committed to ensuring that these reforms meet the intent of Congress and serve the interests of the Department and the men and women of our SOF community. Mr. Chairman, I would like to conclude by thanking the committee again for its strong support of our Special Operations community. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. McManaman. And now, General Clark.
Chairman Gallego, Ranking Member Kelly, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for this opportunity, and I am honored to testify along Mr. Joe McManaman, but also joining in behind me is Chief Greg Smith, my command senior enlisted leader, representing the almost 70,000 men and women of this great command. Greg marked his 31st year in uniform this past spring, and I am always welcome to his counsel and his leadership. USSOCOM, our structure, our authorities, and our purpose are the direct outcome of Congress. We strive each and every day to honor Congress's vision by training and employing the world's finest special operations force this world has ever known, a force that is inclusive and professional, supremely competent and trusted, and reflective of American diversity, values, and always committed to our constitutional oath. The incredible women and men of this multi-component command employ their unique skills globally, fully integrated with the Joint Force, and aligned with the national priorities set by our Secretary that Mr. McManaman outlined. USSOCOM continues to deter and disrupt persistent threats by terrorist and extremist organizations. 20 years of this fight have honed our capability and our resolve. We remain poised to address any threats to the homeland or to the American people with approaches that are effective and sustainable. SOCOM remains well postured to compete against malign state influence. SOF provide unique value in this critical endeavor. Below the level of armed conflict, SOF teams support a wide range of U.S. policy objectives and generate options to counter China, Russia, and other competitors. Often, our activities to counter violent extremist organizations have tangible, derivative value to strategic competition. As we forge partnerships and build partner capacity, we gain access, placement, and influence in critical regions. Should future conflicts arise, our modernization priorities will provide interoperable forces able to win as part of the joint warfighting concept. Our team also extends beyond operators in the field to a wide array of military, interagency, and international partners, as well as our unassailable partnership with ASD SOLIC. The oversight, policy guidance, and advocacy within the Department of Defense provided by ASD SOLIC are essential for the modernization, readiness, and well-being of SOF and their families. Above all, we are committed to upholding the principle of civilian control of our military in line with the Constitution we have pledged to defend. Your continued support in Congress and the vital trust of the American people allow this command to support our nation now and prepare for the challenges of tomorrow. Today, while we are here, over 4,000 special operators stand vigilant in over 60 countries. Their commitment to America's security and prosperity is inspirational, and their enthusiasm to learn, adapt, and serve is infectious. It is my honor to serve with them, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, General Clark. And now we'll be entering the question portion of the committee hearing, and we will start with 5-minute questions, and I will begin. General Clark, earlier this year, USSOCOM released the Strategic Plan for Diversity and Inclusion. What does diversity, inclusion, and equity mean to you, and what are your next steps to actualize this document?
Congressman, diversity for USSOCOM is to make sure that we reflect the best talent and the best people of this country. The people of this country have unique talents and skill sets, and we want to ensure that all of them are given the opportunity when able to meet the standards that are required within our force. And the last thing I would say on the diversity side of this is that we want to ensure that any barriers to come into SOCOM, that whether they are actual or perceived, those are actually put down to allow the best talent to come in. And at the end of the day, this still comes as an operational imperative for our force. When we're operating globally, and as you talked about in great power competition, having individuals that reflect this country, but individuals that can understand others' cultures and where they're coming from, that are problem solvers, are exactly what we need in our force.
Thank you. Mr. McMenamin, if I said correctly again, in your opinion, what is the state of SOF readiness, and what do you believe are the most significant issues affecting readiness today?
As General Clark can probably attest to, SOF readiness is an important criteria for us to stay globally engaged. Whether we're deployed in a security assistance role, whether we're supporting an interagency partner or supporting a foreign partner, the readiness and the SOF capability to respond is a crucial part of the development of the SOF operator and the SOF teams. The training, education, and development of the individual and the leader is imperative to allow us to accomplish missions set out by the Department of Defense and the President of the United States.
And to follow up, or not follow up, but another question, Mr. McGann. The official May 5th statement regarding the revised organization and role of AZ SOLIC stated that the Deputy Secretary of Defense will ensure that SOLIC maintains dedicated resources and grows to a level commensurate with its increased responsibilities. How is the department facilitating the growth given the increase of responsibilities?
Yes, sir. The office has set up a secretariat that is growing in strength with key personnel to work in both the personnel areas such as the diversity and inclusion, also assisting in oversight, assisting in budget development, and working very closely with SOCOM. The team that is in place has a very good relationship with the leadership down at SOCOM, and we can see this relationship growing stronger as the expertise and the exchange of knowledge continues.
Thank you. General Clark, in the 2020 posture statement, you specified that USSOCOM continues to right-size our deployed forces to meet the Secretary of Defense minimum objective of 1 to 2 deployments to dwell ratio with a goal of 1 to 3. In this year's statement, you reference an expectation to achieve a sustainable balance of deployed forces across CVO and strategic competition mission sets and reach the DoD's directed 1 to 2 deployment to dwell ratio for all SOF. Is a 1 to 3 ratio still a goal, and what progress has been made in achieving that goal?
Yes, sir. In line with the Secretary's guidance, the 1 to 3 is still the goal.
Okay. What changes are you making to make that, to increase the dwell time?
Yes,
administrative changes or anything of that nature?
It really goes to operational changes in accordance with, in align with the geographic combatant commands. Number one, we're making sure that the missions that SOF conducts on behalf of the geographic combatant commanders are missions that only SOF should and can do.
Right.
And
As I've said before, not every CT mission has to be done by SOF.
not every single mission across the globe has to be done by our Special Operations Forces. There are, as you well know, there are SOF-specific missions. And then we're also making sure that we leverage allies and partners who are also capable, very capable partners that we have trained with that can actually do the mission that is required by SOF. And so when others can do it at the adequate level, we should allow others to do it.
I think General.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm very encouraged by our progress made on the Armed Overwatch Program and the capability it can provide to our Special Operations Forces. It's important to have a combat platform that is at your disposal, especially when it doesn't put other service members at risk and delivers the firepower that you need. Because our men and women that serve under you, General Clark, they're not scared of going into dangerous way, but we don't need to put them there when we have a platform that doesn't put human lives at risk. And so I'm very encouraged by this. Can you elaborate on the types of missions it can be used for outside the counterterrorism mission in Africa?
Yes, sir, I can, and thanks for your support to this program. This multi-role capability that could provide both intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance overhead, but also is prepared to fire munitions in support of a team that could be in harm's way. It can be used globally. As you identified, it could use in Africa, which it's optimally, but it could also be used in the Philippines, in Thailand, wherever we need, or in South America, wherever we need ISR overhead for our troops. It's really a policy whether or not fires are required. It's policy and it's the conditions on the ground that could dictate whether or not you needed fires. So it is a multi-role platform.
Absolutely, and I know President Biden supports this system, and I know that several other people do. But I just want to reiterate the point. Yeah, it does collect intelligence and help with that, but at the end of the day, it delivers a payload that either support or keep our men and women in uniform from having to be exposed to combat fire of the enemy.
Yes, sir. If I could take that. From the intel side, it's direct operational support to the team on the ground. And it's that direct, and it's raw information that is provided for the team. It's not there specifically.
Just like an Apache helicopter or a C-130 that's armed to support you guys, it's your platform that's operational in nature.
That's correct.
Let me go a little bit. I mentioned in my opening remarks, this is the second year in a row that SOCOM has incurred a budget decrease. The FY22 budget request from the administration cut SOCOM by $495 million, a 4% decrease, and that's not counting real dollars on inflation, which continues to rise. What are you not able to do because of these cuts, and what are the associated risks?
Yes, sir. For us, our operations and maintenance funding remains steady. So we can still maintain the operations required overseas and the readiness and training, as was asked about, our training levels can maintain. Where we're taking some reduction is in MILCON and some of our research, development, and technology. But what we have done inside of SOCOM's budget on the O&M is actually adjusted towards some priorities toward great power competition and looking long-term for that budget. I'll defer to Mr. McMenamin.
And let me just real quick, because I know how much time you guys spend actually pulling triggers and training and in preparations for missions and working as teams and the extensive amount of training. I understand that most of our warriors in your command are a little older. They're not your 19-year-old kids. They're a little older, and trust me, as you get older, your body's a little harder to maintain. And so some of those dollars is where that's going, and it matters that they be mentally, physically, and technically competent in everything that they perform. Would you agree with that, General Clark?
Yes, sir, I'd agree with that.
And I won't even try to pronounce. I'm from Mississippi, and we don't get more than one syllable out.
Yes, sir. You can either Joe or Mac always works for anybody that can't say it. You know, in support of the president's budget, SOCOM has had to make some choices. But as General Clark, you know, laid out what his priorities are, he still maintains that, you know, the operational readiness will be there, taking care of the force will be there, but the challenges would be in some of the R&D and some of the MILCON. But, you know, in supporting the budget, we make the hard choices, and General Clark, you know, working with us has to.
Let me interrupt because I got one more question, and I'll take it for the record because I don't think you can answer it here, and this is both of y'all. I'm really concerned about this over the horizon. I really feel like we're hand-waving this, and we're not doing the amount of details to air corridors, which locations we are, protecting how things are used, you know, our tactics, techniques, and procedures. So, guys, I think you guys have to take the lead on this and making sure that you give us a detailed plan of how we plan on executing over the horizon rather than a hand wave. And for that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Now recognize Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry to turn on my microphone. Anticipating you might call on me. Sorry about that. I'll stay in my lane. So thanks for coming out. Actually, McMenamins is a pub based out of Portland, so it's really easy for us in the Northwest to pronounce your last name.
I wish I was related for the free stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. General Clark, I want to go back to Armed Overwatch, and thanks for answering questions, and thanks for coming in yesterday to discuss that as well. But I think one of the concerns in 20 years of being on the subcommittee and on the committee and trying to do my oversight job is suddenly not. It's almost suddenly coming across a program called Armed Overwatch that wasn't there, and now it's there, and that usually doesn't happen. Usually there's a longer process, a set requirements to walk the Pentagon into a program that you need. And so, in my view, the program deserves a lot more, a little less love than it's getting, and a little more scrutiny than it's getting, in my view. And that's where I come from on this, and we've had this conversation a little bit. So, in that vein, a basic question I have for you about the application of the platform in austere environments is kind of a basic requirement. Is there enough work for an Armed Overwatch platform for what you're asking for? Given the focus on really it's a CTVEO purpose. I understand where you're coming from in other countries, but it's really a CTVEO purpose.
Sir,
right into the microphone. And pull it. There you go.
Yeah, is that better?
Yeah.
Not much.
Sir, to your first point, since the minute I walked into this job, almost 2.5 years ago, we have been talking Armed Overwatch, and so it was not new to me coming in. So if we have not communicated that from the onset, and it was there before I came into the position. As far in terms of the requirement, as we looked globally and looked at the operating model where SOF forces are deployed today and where they are deployed in the future, we do think that the operating concept that we have for these aircraft would in fact get to full utilization of them in the future.
And how many would you, in the end, how many would you presume you would need, or the SOCOM would need?
We would presume for operations 60 aircraft, divided into 4 squadrons of 15 each, and then we would need additional 10 to 15 aircraft for training. So we could have 1 squadron of 15 aircraft deployed at any one time, and it goes back to the question about dwell ratio, that we then would have, with this aircraft that we're setting up for the future, we'd have one deployed and 3 back, recovering, preparing, and then training for future missions to meet that dwell ratio.
Yeah. So explain, if you can, 5 minutes really isn't long enough for this, but explain if you can, your number 2 and number 3 priorities are undersea capabilities, and I think more ISRs and ISR platforms. And then you have an unfunded priorities list as well, which you're required to give, and I would love to rescind that law because, you know, Head Start doesn't give, we don't require Head Start to give us their unfunded priorities list, which they ought to be able to do as well, but they're not allowed to. That's my problem. How does this, why did this come out number one? Because you talked about this number one, compared to a lot of other really great things that are on the list and really great things that are on the unfunded priorities list. I'm not sold on where it fits in your priorities.
As we're looking at the broad capabilities for USSOCOM, the modernization of our ISR is one of our top priorities.
Sure.
It's not just armed overwatch, but we see armed overwatch as a very cost-effective, approach to a requirement to support our SOF teams, in the future. So that's why we continue to push for it, and knowing that our other.
I have a short time. I apologize. How long in the near future is your near future for the use of armed overwatch? Do you see this as a bridge to something else, or is this something it's necessary now, and so we got to spend the money now because this won't be a problem later?
It's part today because there are other platforms that are actually hitting the end of their life cycle that are currently in support, and that's the U-28 aircraft that would need re-winging of all those platforms, which would be almost as it would be almost the same cost to re-wing all those aircraft as we start going towards the armed overwatch.
Yeah, I've run out of time, and I appreciate it,
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Chair.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Clark, does the fiscal year 22 budget request include efforts to provide the Human Performance and Wellness Program to the Special Forces community and the National Guard?
So it provides specifically for our active component, and it does, as you're well aware, we have increased the funding specifically to the human performance, cognitive and behavioral health capabilities within this. There has been some funding to the National Guard as a part of the Potiph program, but on the spending of this money, we're very, very careful about not the amount, but that we're in accordance with the law of this funding towards our National Guard component.
Okay. So if the Guard component's an issue, then we need to take a look at the law in the National Defense Authorization Act with regard to including.
So I need to come back to,
Okay.
If I could take for the
That's fine.
record, because I don't want to confuse myself or the committee on
Okay.
what is allowed under the law for funding of the National Guard with our preservation of the force and funding.
Okay, that's fine. Obviously, the Special Force operations have been predominantly Middle East oriented over the last couple of decades. As we talk about the changes to great power and near-peer competition, the reorientation, the training of Special Operations Forces, how do you expect that to change, specifically with regard to the urban terrain versus a desert terrain? And while I recognize that there are cities inside the countries that we've been operating in, they don't necessarily look the same as a metropolitan area in an industrialized country. So my question gets to the special operations training at urban terrain.
Yeah, sure. You're hitting a key point that we and as always we're operating we operate in urban environments, even in the counterterrorism VEO fight. But I think increasingly we will operate more in a subterranean and urban environment. And if I could take your question one step further, the mission, many of our missions in the counter-terrorism, counter-violent extremists have been direct action missions. I think more importantly, what we have to look at is our irregular warfare competencies and training surrogate forces, not necessarily in a direct action fight.
That includes information and cyber.
That
as well
includes
as-
information, cyber, logistics networks, and working with foreign partners.
One of the reasons our men and women are so good at what they do is because of as much as we wish they weren't deployed as much as they are, they have a lot of experience. And my concern is if we end up in a true urban conflict, that is not going to be something where our operators have done it repeatedly, if you will.
Yes, sir. We set up specific venues to train our individuals in those urban environments.
I'm looking forward to more information on the Armed Overwatch. I'm getting short on time right now. I appreciate your time discussing the A-10s, and I understand that the Army is expecting to have a close air support platform. I very much look forward to the continued discussions on that platform, what it is, what it costs, and what its capabilities are. But I appreciate your time this morning, and I'll save the remainder of my questions for the next session. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Representative Austin. Representative Keating.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to thank the witnesses for their service to the country. Just want to touch on an issue in terms of machine learning and artificial intelligence being used for support force and mission readiness, how you think the budget serves this, and also it's just not the systems, it's the individuals behind the systems, and I'm curious to share conversation I started in terms of a fine institution in Massachusetts, MIT, and some of the work that's being done to prepare our forces.
So a couple initiatives that SOCOM has taken on over the last few years. We hired our first chief data officer into SOCOM 3 years ago, and he is now the chief data officer for the Department of Defense. We've hired a subsequent one, and as anybody working in the AI, data is the most important part to ensuring that we have that we can use AI effectively. Second, we are bringing interns into SOCOM. We brought our first group in last summer to help us solve some of our problems in real world. We are teamed very closely with the Project Maven and the Joint Artificial Intelligence inside the Department of Defense, and they see us as a first user for these capabilities, and we have used and looked hard at object detection in the combat zones using Maven. And as you and I spoke about, but for the broader committee, SOCOM set up AI course with MIT for our mid and senior grade leaders, over 400 participants of mid-grade and senior leaders in order for them to learn what the AI principles were so they could ask the right questions. And MIT was a great partner with us in teaching our workforce, our men and women in uniform. Thank you.
Yeah, the systems are great, but we have to have the people there to utilize those the right way. Just the second area I just want to touch upon, and that's your feelings on our preparedness and where we have to go for underwater systems and marine systems, maritime systems, something that, again, in my district, we have fine institutions there doing great studies, and so it's an interest level of mine, but I'm sure it is with you folks too. So maybe you can explore or expand on some of the priorities there, and are they being met?
Our Navy SEALs over the past 20 years have been heavily invested in the land, and specifically in the combat zones. We're now refocusing their efforts to their undersea seabed capabilities. And in that, as we looked at our budget, we're actually we have shifted within our budget to develop those capabilities for the future. And so teaming with the Navy and with other civilian organizations is critical.
Great.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
you, Representative King. Now we have Representative Franklin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To follow up a little on the undersea warfare and seabed warfare question, and also along with Ranking Member Kelly's questions before regarding the budget, I see, in the unfunded priorities, there are some of those that touch into that area. And I would love to hear some more, probably in a different forum, about some of the capabilities that you're working on from the R&D side. But in looking at the cut that you received this year, we could fund all of those unfunded priorities with less than what the cuts have been to your budget. And I understand we can maintain the op tempo and we can get the job done, and that's what you all are called to do and will always do. But do you have concern that if this persists, will you be able to fund going forward the R&D necessary to shift from the CT mission in the Middle East towards the great power competition?
I'll take a stab at it and then turn it over to Mr. McMenamin. I do believe with this year that we were able to adjust accordingly and prioritize, and for that unfunded requirement list, if we had more money, that's where we would go to, and they're prioritized in that manner. But for future years, we got to continue to look at what those priorities are. Mr. McMenamin.
Yeah, I would say, as we all know, technology moves a lot faster many times than the budgets in the budget planning process does. General Clark made the choices to prioritize. I think as we go forward, working within the president's budget, we look at some of these requirements and continue to identify those investments that have the greatest promise to the SOCOM enterprise, whether that's in ISR, human performance, AI, machine learning, to prioritize those that can increase the effectiveness of SOCOM and the SOF operators more than others that may be on the list sometimes.
Okay. General, regarding SOFWorks, you've mentioned that in your testimony, and again, kind of piggybacking on the thought of the responsiveness that technology is changing quickly. This is a program I think other services are envious of, the special operations ability to act on technology quickly and get them fielded out there. The ability to interact with the Small Business Innovation Research Pilot Program, I think has been helpful. I've gotten very good feedback from small businesses that have wanted to be more involved in the acquisition process. Seems like it's been a great success. That authorization is expiring this year. We're looking to not only continue that, but expand it. Could you elaborate or comment some on what that means from your end and what you'd like to see from it going forward?
Yes, sir. A couple points. You highlighted SOFWorks, which is our off-campus, what I call incubator of ideas, where folks without security clearances can come in, work with our operators, and it is a magnificent capability for us. It's enabled by the Small Business Initiative, and we really appreciate Congress's support to that, and would ask for your support in continuing to grow that small business capability, because it is giving us ideas, because a lot of the great ideas are really coming from those small businesses that we can tap into very quickly, because we what I think we do better than anyone else is tie our operator, who knows what the specific requirements, and right to the industry partners, and work that together so we come up with the best product. Thank you.
That's really all the questions I had. I did want to take the opportunity, though, to thank you, General, on behalf of the subcommittee here for your and your staff's hospitality a few months back down at MacDill. Having spent a lot of time on the base, I still learned a lot, and there's nothing like the firsthand opportunity to see it, but thank you all for that. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Clark, as you know, I got a chance when we were on that visit to MacDill to see the joint MISO Web Ops Center, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the value of the GMWIC to our national security objectives, and then also confirm that the budget request of just $479,000 would fully fund its requirements.
Our joint MISO Web Ops Center, MISO, Military Information Support Ops, the acronym within the acronym. information in today's competition is critical, and ensuring that adversaries' disinformation and misinformation is countered is one of the things that our Jim Wick does. And I think it does, as you personally witness, it does it well. And we continue to grow the capabilities, now and in the future, working very closely with the combatant commands. Our budget request for that in times with the department is, as you noted, was steady from last year to this year. A lot of that just has to do with it's still growing and still developing. I will tell you, if we see that we could actually spend more money and more capability was needed in this fiscal year, I would ask for adjustments to be made in the middle of the fiscal year. But right now, we don't see that. We do believe it's sufficient funding.
Great, thank you. And then on a topic that you and I discussed a little bit yesterday, given that we both live in Florida, I'm really concerned about some of the threats that are in our neighborhood or in our backyard in the Caribbean and Latin America, whether it's from China or non-state actors. I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about how SOCOM and SOC South are postured to address these threats and challenges and what you're seeing in the region.
Yeah. South America, Central America in our backyard. We work very closely, with our special operations component, and we've had persistent presence and engagement inside South America for decades, and continue to employ soft forces and capabilities to include ISR and our people into the region. It's changed. Many times we're there to address other nations' security threats, but as we have seen, both Russia and China are showing great interest in that neighborhood, and having individuals that are present and helping host countries allows us to see and sense what some of those two near-peer adversaries' malign behaviors are, and ensure that we can, in fact, counter those and work with the host countries.
Great. And although my last name is Murphy, I'm not going to take a swing at Mr. Mack's full last name here. But I was wondering if you can give me a little bit of an update about the Functional Center for Security Studies in Irregular Warfare. Irregular warfare is going to be a key component of great power competition. And in the FY21 NDAA, we had directed the department to move forward with establishing that.
Yes. In fact, I saw the draft of the report a few weeks ago, and it makes some very good recommendations, but it needed to be refined a bit more before we send it over. So we are in the process of going through the report, making sure it answers the appropriate questions and provides the right information. We may find ourselves requiring a change to the security cooperation legislation that talks about regional centers. And that would be Chapter 16 of the bill. So as we go through this, we look at the different options and the locations, and we also look at what we may need for legislative authority to establish the center. We will include all those in the report and work within the department to bring that legislative proposal up to you.
Great, thank you. And General Clark, do you think that that center and the irregular warfare focus can be of use to SOF?
I absolutely do, and because of the education, continued education of our force, tied in, I think, and you're familiar with our Joint Special Operations University. I think the power of those two together could make it even better.
Great, thank you. Go ahead. Did you have something else to add, Mr.?
No, I would also just like to add on to what General Clark just said, is that it'd also be a great value for our general purpose forces, because irregular warfare is not just a SOF enterprise. We have to train our regular general purpose forces to operate in various environments, gray zone, irregular warfare, whatever we name it, but I think it's just as important for our general purpose forces as it is for our special operators.
Great, thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Murphy. We'll go to Representative Waltz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to pick up on Ranking Member Kelly and Mr. Larson's conversation on armed overwatch and kind of get out there for the record that this isn't new. It may be, I guess a new conversation, a new people to the conversation, but this is something that's been going on for over a decade. It was under the Air Force with the Light Attack Armed Reconnaissance Program that actually started, from my understanding, in 2009. So for a dozen years, we have been messing around with this program, and our operators downrange, including myself, in many occasions, couldn't get the air support and the close air support that they needed. So I just think that's important for everybody to understand, but we are where we are now, and we've had not one, but two chiefs of staff of the Air Force, General Goldfein and now General Brown, validate this requirement, say SOCOM should have a leadership role in this requirement. We now have the #1 request from the SOCOM commander, and as required by last NDAA, an independent third-party study that says the other alternatives, namely the MQ-9 and or the A-10, are far more expensive and far less capable. Did I mischaracterize anything there, General Clark?
No, you did not.
Okay. So I think the other thing that's important to understand is it's easy to say, well, this is just really focused on Africa. Right now we have operators, and I think, frankly, we need more out there because great power competition isn't just about Taiwan. It's happening on the continent of Africa, operating in a space the size of the United States, China, India, and Western Europe combined, with next to no air support, that this capability could provide down there with the teams in a rugged capability and at a fraction of the cost. I think the biggest piece here in why the Air Force is so supportive is they need to focus on the great power fight. They need their 5th-generation stealth assets focused on China and Russia, not bombing terrorists in the grass at $40,000 an hour. Is that a fair characterization of kind of the requirement?
So on top of that, of what you just said, it's also the tanker support in the backside of more than just the aircraft flying, but the other aircraft that have to support those aircraft and the significantly larger maintenance tail that goes with that our armed overwatch requirement specifically narrows and limits the
Right.
the maintenance force.
All of which we need focused on
Right.
rightly with the great power competition. But the terrorists are still out there, and we still have operators out there by, with, and through our local allies, accompanying them in light-skinned, unarmored vehicles that needs this kind of capability. I wish we had this kind of hand-wringing. For the amount of money that we're talking about here, that we wish had this kind of hand-wringing in Congress over the, things like the Joint Strike Fighter or the Ford-class carrier. But it just kind of befuddles me, the overriding concern here. It's a need, and we have third parties, the Air Force and SOCOM, and now the President's budget all saying it's a need, and I certainly hope we can find that support here. I just want to switch in the time I have remaining. I share the concern about over-horizon. I have yet to find that doctrinal term. We've got the President of the United States saying it as though this is something we do all the time. Of course, we have the capability to hit anyone, anywhere around the world, and I know your operator is going to maintain that capability. But we need to be very wide-eyed about the massive risk we're asking them to undertake. And we may not be blind in Afghanistan, but I think we're going to be legally blind. We're going to be darn close. And let me ask you this. Could you do your mission better from a counter-VEO standpoint, keeping a lid on half the world's terrorist organizations with Bagram or without Bagram?
We can always do our mission better when we're in closer proximity to the problem.
Absolutely. In the time I have remaining, if you are ever asked to undertake any type of unconventional warfare activities against the Chinese Communist Party, it's notable that most of their new nuclear capabilities coming online are in Western China, 400 miles from Bagram. Would it be better to have that base and have that platform, or to try to do it from somewhere else?
Yeah. We've developed unique capabilities, as you well know, over the last 20 years. And now there's no place in the globe that SOCOM could not go to accomplish its mission.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield.
Representative Welts, Representative Sherrill.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank both of you gentlemen for your service and for joining us at today's hearing, as well as to pass on my appreciation to the entire SOCOM enterprise for the tireless work they do to protect our nation, as well as to ensuring broader peace and stability worldwide. I'd like to thank you, General Clark, and your staff for taking the time to meet with me yesterday. I found our conversation very informative, and the continued work to provide updates, including General Slife briefing me on Operation Overwatch during his son's Naval Academy graduation. Most critically, though, I want to draw attention to the immense sacrifices made by our special operators and their families over the last 20 years. Particularly in Afghanistan, as our presence in that company comes to an end, we as a nation owe the brave men and women who fought there our immense gratitude and appreciation. And please pass on my personal thanks to all of those who have served, continue to serve, and to their families. So, with regard to cyber, where we're increasingly finding ourselves challenged by China and Russia, this is also a key area where USSOCOM is seeing a significant per capita increase in spending. Can you explain what your cyber activities funding within your operations and maintenance budget, what you want that to provide?
Cyber for SOCOM is particularly focused on the close access near where we would be in proximity to the threat. Where Cybercom is actually looking globally, ours is in direct support of our operators on the ground.
So how much of your cyber defense and information assurance is coming from contractor-provided services, and how much is an organic SOCOM or DoD Cybercom capability? What factors at SOCOM do you use in choosing one over the other?
Cyber mission teams that are provided by Cybercom in direct support of SOCOM. We have some contractors that support the defense of our network inside SOCOM, but I'd have to take for the record to get back to you on that, on the specific breakout of each one.
Oh, thank you. And so I will submit for the record whether or not those costs could go down if we provided some of the capabilities organically. And given the cyber threat of Russia and China with the transition to great power competition, as well as Special Operations Forces' historic leadership in operating from denied areas, to what extent do you see opportunities to leverage SOCOM in the future in support of intelligence, influence, cyber operations against China and Russia? And do you have the tools and resources to do so?
This goes back to our value proposition of being forward deployed. As I talked about in opening statement, in 60 countries where both Russia and China are also deployed in that close proximity. And in closed session, I can give you some specific information on that.
That's great. I'll take the rest of the questions in closed session. Thank you, and I yield back.
Representative Bacon.
Thank you. And I appreciate our leadership here today. I'm grateful for what you do. Mr. McMenamin, thank you for serving the Pentagon, and we appreciate General Clark and the Command Chief, Smith, in the back there. I primarily served in the conventional forces, but I've had a lot of opportunities to work with the Special Forces. And when I spent my year in Iraq, one of my 4 deployments, seeing at least as a minimum 4 missions a night by the SEALs teams, it was awe-inspiring. The courage, the can-do spirit, the ops tempo is just incredible. I know it's not just the SEALs, it's the whole community. And I think America's best aspire to be on the Special Forces teams. I would like to say for the record that I oppose the President's budget. When you factor in a 5% inflation rate versus a 1.7% growth in the budget, not factoring in the inflation, that amounts to about a 3% cut to our budget. or about $30 billion. And that's going to have an impact throughout our military. And so I think as a minimum, the president should be recommending at least even with inflation or an even budget. But this is a reduction in real dollars, and it's going to have an impact on all our services and on our Special Forces community. So with that in mind, if we could get about a 3% growth, or at least some increases there, I'd like to ask General Clark, what would be your top unfunded priorities that you would like to see funded? I know you touched on this a little bit, but I'd like to deal with it directly.
Yes, sir. We've submitted our unfunded priorities, and they're broadly in the crisis response, underwater capabilities that we need for the future. And so the continued funding of those in those areas, and next generation ISR is a third one that with Congress's support to those unfunded requirements. That's where I would spend my next dollar.
And I hope we can, through this process, do a little better than what we have proposed. I think one of the aspects of your missions that a lot of people don't know about is the training you give to Special Forces with our allies. Could you talk about some of our successes there? Because I'm aware of them, but I think the public would like to know.
But there's two parts to training with our allies. One is there's many times when our allies come here to the United States, where our forces are stationed. They come to our Joint Special Operations University. They go to some of our schools and classes here in the U.S., and they'll bring entire units, and we will set up specific training to help them meet their requirements. But then many of our training exercises are actually when we deploy a team, an element to that country, and it could be anywhere from a few weeks to a few months with our what's referred to as our Joint Combined Exercises for Training, or JSETs, which are value added for us because we are getting the vast majority of the training benefit, or whether we're working the mountains, in Peru, or whether or not we're in the jungles of somewhere in Panama or Colombia that we can't get some places in the United States. And so those training exercises are invaluable for us to work in different environments.
See, some of our allies do missions after years of training with you. There's been some impressive successes there, and it expands our capability in the end. When our allies have similar capabilities, it doesn't fall just on our shoulders. So I appreciate that. Changing gears a little bit, I'm going to try to ask this question carefully. Ayman al-Zawahiri is still the al-Qaeda leader as far as we know. Is it safe to say, and can Americans feel confident that we're being vigilant, and if given the opportunity that someday we will get justice for this guy who's killed thousands of Americans?
We continue, and we'll always look at those individuals who threaten our country, whether it's Zawahiri or any others. We give no one quarter, and we'll always go after the enemies of our country as directed.
Okay, thank you, and I yield back.
Thanks.
Welch, you have a question? Okay, go ahead for the record.
Yeah, General Clark, all of the, as we know, all of the services except Air Force, Space Force are looking at force reductions, looking at size reductions. And my concern is as the, Army wrestles with that internally, and the Navy wrestles with that internally, the Marine Corps wrestles with that internally, that has a threefold compounding effect on SOCOM. So can you walk through how you're managing that process with the services and with OSD?
Well, honestly, I'd like...
we'll ask OSD. Fair enough. Phone a friend.
But it's a great question, and that's before I defer to Mr. McMenamin, this is exactly why we in SOCOM need a strong ASD SOLIC, who can see as the compounding interest of all services looking at SOCOM inside cuts. And so I'll defer to Mr. McMenamin.
As the services look at the different reductions, I know we advocate very strongly to sustain the quality and the size of the force that we have down at SOCOM, and whether that's the Army, Air Force, Marines, or some of the great civilians we have. Being an advocate means we sit at the meetings, we explain why it's important, we push for the budgets, we push for the training programs, we push for the access to get interviews with quality individuals to come join the SOF team. So it's just a broader effort from the new ASD role, with the oversight to push and be an advocate for the SOCOM programs within the department.
So Secretary Austin's made the decision to not elevate Solik to an undersecretary, but continue that direct reporting line, the dual reporting line, right, to USD policy and to him. So I'm taking from that your assurance that we don't have that triple multiplying effect from all of the services, that SOCOM doesn't become the bill payer for 3 services force reductions. That you given the committee that assurance?
The role for Solik is a direct report to the Secretary and an advocate for the SOCOM enterprise. For those things that don't deal with the Solik man, train, and equip, the ASD role goes through the Undersecretary for Policy. But we very strongly advocate with the Secretary, either through the defense management groups, the senior leader seminars and meetings, for the role and the
Do you want to give me that assurance?
The sustainability. We believe in the sustainability of the SOCOM enterprise.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield.
Representative Larson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And just on that point, it's going to be something that I think we agree on, and a lot of us agree on the subcommittee about oversight, the need for it, the new directive, a little bit different than it was in the past before the last change, and a little bit more aggressive. And so I think just generally after going through this, it seems to be something that we can grab onto a little bit to ensure there's appropriate oversight. But just a question on something totally different here. General Clark, the 22 budget requests $10 million for a new Potiph cognitive performance program. Can you discuss how that funding will be used on cognitive agility and resilience within the forces, please?
Yes, sir. And I appreciate this question. Because as we've seen,
I wanted to ask a question that you appreciated.
No. Not all questions have to be appreciated, as you well know. The cognitive domain is something that is critical to our forces. You can well imagine. When Potiph first started, it was almost exclusively focused on the physical, because it's what we could see. In particular, we're having a lot of the physical wounds. In cognitive space, it's to ensure that our operators, actually go through the mental drills. And I've been through some of them. When you have to rapidly identify targets, have shoot or no shoot scenarios with someone watching you, and quickly adapt to what we're doing, because we want our folks, and they combine this with the physical, where it becomes challenging, and actually bringing in professionals who can assess where someone is today, and then also look to where they could be in the future to help them develop, really makes a better and honestly more capable force.
Can you discuss the resiliency part, though? At some point, right, the person is going to leave Special Operations Forces, is going to retire, and can you discuss a little bit how these dollars might be used to think about the long-term mental health and life of that person?
Well, I think you're hitting a key part, and this is where both the cognitive development and make sure that our forces, it also hits the behavioral piece. And 40% now of Potiph is 40% or more, slightly more, is actually the cognitive and the behavioral. Mm-hmm. So that our operators, we're looking for someone that is soft for life. They're inside this formation. We're taking care of them as they leave, and making sure they get a health check on their way out, and to make sure that they can be a functioning citizen and continue to provide value to our nation after they leave.
Yeah, and finally, have you thought through, if we were to provide the dollars, how you would use it, how would you deploy these dollars? Not how would you use them, but the mechanism
Specifically, it would be bringing in professionals that are versed in this, and then tracking the improvements, so the data, to make sure that the money is being spent properly and we're actually seeing improvement in our operators.
Yeah, that's fair. Thank you very much. Thanks. I yield back.
Thank you. And that finishes our open committee hearing, and we'll be moving to 2212 for our classified portion. We'll reconvene in about, I'd say, 10 minutes. Thank you.